For overall questions, tech talk, and if you'd like to submit your reel for us to actually critique live, please see the links below and we will definitely get to them in the order that they appear.
Understood. We're doing the best we can. Are you an effective team?
We are an effective team.
We're here with Rob Tasker, who is, I think you contacted me if you were just interested in being on the show and so forth. Did you want to just do a rough introduction? I feel like.
Yeah, so, I'm living in Iceland now, and I grew up and lived for most of my life in Toronto, Canada. Got started in visual effects about 10 years ago. Even before that, I was interested in doing animation and visual effects, but moved to Iceland, and there's a film festival going on here that's just started where I work on the opening film called RIF, so it's the Reykjavik International.
Question I have to ask for you, since you have a really awesome background here and a ton of movies and TV shows, including the infamous John Wick and The Expanse. My friend Jason is obsessed with The Expanse. Can't stop talking about it. I haven't seen it yet because it's on. Isn't it on a streaming service?
Sci-Fi had it for they ended the show, and Amazon picked them up for last season, and they're renewed for another season. So they're going to be starting production on that. I was talking to my friend who's a visual effects supervisor on the whole show, and he said I think next week they're going to start really getting into action on it.
So here is your website, robtasker.com. You got your recent work. We're gonna take a look at your reel in a little bit. So you got a lot of history here. Question I have for you is, I noticed you're currently working in obviously Iceland, but are you taking a break from VFX for a little bit, or?
Yeah, I mean it was a kind of a funny story. Everyone always asks me, moving to Iceland, it's such a big change from what I'm doing. But I have a strong programming background, and working in visual effects and sort of getting into the position that I was in, I was always the one sort of at the end of projects. And so as I was sort of hitting that end of the project and finishing it up, I didn't get that downtime that a lot of people enjoy after a project. Is then the other project that was going on in the studio, they'd say, hey, come jump in, we need help on this one. So it was a lot of that, and an opportunity came in Iceland to come, and I wanted to always travel through Europe, and I thought, why not take a small break, go work a simple job, travel around Europe while I'm doing it for 6 months, a year, or something like that, and then see where I'm at to go back to Toronto, and it just break longer than I thought it was going to be so far.
You actually are our first Canadian, I think, on our show. You're originally from Canada. I think we've had like everyone from all over the world. I think you're officially, and it's funny because that's where majority of the VFX industry is, and yet I haven't had a single Canadian on this show so far.
It's amazing. I was just at the opening, as I said, the opening film that I did for the film festival here, which is an American film with an Icelandic director and things like that. And I was talking to the main actor, and we were both discussing how Canada and Toronto and visual effects and sort of the scene there, or even the Toronto International Film Festival, how big it is for Canada. Sort of, for me, growing up in Toronto, I never would have thought that it's a big country, but it's not a huge population. You would never think that Toronto would be a hub for film. In general, whether it be visual effects or just festivals, so it's weird that there's recognition there when all these big actors and stuff move to LA and various parts of the United States.
It's a beautiful place. I mean, I only know Iceland from movies like Oblivion.
Yeah.
You see the beautiful footage that's in there. It's like, wow. And I've had a couple friends of mine who've taken the time to go out there and just explore, the all different areas, and he's just seeing some of the views are just amazing. So it gets pretty cold up there, does it? Or?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, it's not as cold as in Canada. The temperature, it's very moderate. So I'm a Celsius guy from Canada, so it would be just below freezing in the winter time, uh, and then in the summer it's I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's around 16 to 20 degrees Celsius. So it's I don't even want to guess what that is in Fahrenheit. Maybe it's like 75 or something, 80.
So,
But it never gets too hot, but it never gets too cold. Whereas in Canada, you get really, really cold in the winter, and then in the summer it gets really hot as well with a lot of humidity.
yeah, it's welcome to Chicago too.
Yeah, Chicago's pretty close. I think Chicago is actually the sister city to Toronto, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a little bit south, but yeah, we're about to as we have just recently shifted from summer to fall. Season wise, you could already sense, you already see it's like boom, cold, muggy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
already hitting. Like it's like a door, just like closes when it opens. But so question, I think we better start from the beginning here. Did your first college before you? I'm assuming you didn't originally plan on going into visual effects, but was Durham College your first college you went to?
No,
Or?
actually, it's funny enough is when I was pretty young, a few years before I went to Durham College, I started getting interested in animation. And so I knew 3D Studio Max, and that's basically where I started. And I found this website that I'm not sure how active it is now, but it was 3dbuzz.com, and it was super popular when I was looking into it, and there was a lot of training and things like that. So I was going through the training content that was available through that, and then I think a year and a half after discovering that website, I found out that they had a program that they run down in Tennessee that was, I think it's 8 or 10 weeks or something like that. So I finished up high school and I said, to my parents, I'm going to move down to Tennessee for 10 weeks. I'm going to take this animation program that's in the middle of nowhere, an hour outside of Nashville. And I had a friend of mine who was also starting to get interested in animation. He was like, yeah, I'll come, let's just do it. So we took the bus and went down there and took an animation course with the guys who ran 3dbuzz.com. After that, I had actually gone to school. My whole goal was, while I was going through that was, I loved programming, doing websites and small stuff like that. Got into the animation. I thought, okay, well, it seems like I'm going to go into like a TD kind of role. And I had heard about that position before, having the programming skills and having animation. I was like, that's where I'm going to end up. So I came back from Tennessee, enrolled in computer programming course at a college in Toronto. But I realized that wasn't 100% what I wanted. So I left that, and then that's when I enrolled at Durham College, which had a 3-year 3D animation program. Went through that, and again, sort of the last year of the 3D animation program, I was introduced into compositing, and it was After Effects and things like that, and I got interested in that on the sole fact that I just hated animating in the graph editor and doing all these small things with animation. I thought compositing, I saw results pretty quick. Plus, I like the fact that it was something I can go out, I can film something, because I was always interested in filming, so I can go film something and then put in some subtle effects that that you could do with After Effects, and that's what I really loved. I always never thought of like big explosions and things like that. I always thought selling stuff like changing the sky from something plain to having a nice cloudy day, or something just sort of adds to it but doesn't take away from the shots. So that's what drew me to compositing. And then right after I finished Durham College, I think within 4 weeks, I was offered a job at Soho, and that's kind of kickstarted my career.
Compositing was something you had to discover because it was so hidden, I mean, it was just like something like, what is this? Oh, most compositors would tell you they started out in the generalist 3D realm, where they were like poking around with stuff like that. And my intentions were always to start. I was working in, got a degree in film. I thought, well, let's try VFX. Let's see this. And I started getting a passion of like, ooh, there's this program called Buju. Oh, now I can actually track something, and now I can render something out of Maya and then put that into the actual live action scene. Being I call ourselves Jurassic Park babies because that was the film that kind of inspired us all. Like, wow, I want to do that for a living. I mean, it was just that film. I swear that is the film that is the the beginnings of just the inspiration for visual effects artists. I mean, it's just one film, but man, it definitely made an impact on so many people. Right
Yeah,
after
and
that,
what I love about that movie as well is, the visual effects in it still hold up really well. A lot of stuff, I remember even in video games or, whatever industry you're looking at, you're playing the Nintendo 64 Legend of Zelda game Ocarina of Time, and you're looking at it and you're like, this is amazing, or Final Fantasy for PlayStation 2. You're like, things can't get better than this. Or even, Lord of the Rings, the early movies, looking at those again now, you're like, we've progressed a lot, whereas in Jurassic Park with the dinosaurs and stuff, it still holds up really well. And I think, that was a big part of what interested a lot of people, is how good it looked.
I always, when someone's as experienced as yourself, I always sort of turn on the ask the prophet mode. Where do you see visual effects going with all of these new post houses popping up? I mean, I never even heard of this one that you worked at, Rocket Science VFX. I mean, there's so many little small, but eventually they grow up to be big VFX houses
Yeah.
around. I mean, what's the climate as far as the bidding wars today? Is it still pretty manageable? Is there still tons of work out there? Or?
In Toronto, I was actually, as I said, I was talking to my friend who is on the production side of The Expanse, and so he's, overseeing all the visual effects for that show. And we were talking about how many vendors there are in the Toronto area. And I think for season 4, they had like 13 or 15 different vendors just for that show. And places like Rocket Science, when I started, it was much smaller, and now I think there are over 100 people. Soho VFX was the exact same thing. I got there and there was 20 to 30 people, and then they grew to over 100. And ever since I've been in Iceland, I've had friends in Toronto move to these other studios that just popped up. Pixamondo in Toronto started when I was still in Toronto, but I had friends go there. And then there's these 3D conversion places, and then there's like Mavericks and Snowball Studio. There's so many that have popped up, and it is because there is just so much work to go around, so that people can do it.
I come from back in the day, way back in the day, working for NetherRealm Studios, formerly Midway Games, and
Okay.
I was basically one of the new hires they brought in that was to take on the next gen from the old gen. We were popping into Unreal 3 for the first time, and there was
Yeah.
the work was tripled, if not quadrupled. And
Yeah.
what I found was there was an interesting combination. Like there was the old guard, who were more scientific in background and were geniuses, and the new guard, which were not as smart.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those.
Yeah. I mean,
It was
just
interesting.
new tools come out and they help you out. It's not like when Pixar did their first movie, they're sort of rendering command line, and sort of the first 3D was more programming than art, and I think, so we've come a long way in a short amount of time, I think.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, the tools 20 years ago that people use as the basic, the essence of their career, ZBrush, for
Yeah.
instance, didn't exist.
Yeah.
It's like you're a
Exactly.
ZBrush
And now,
artist.
now you're looking at these huge blockbusters, and they're using game engines to do sort of on-set visualizations, which is I haven't even got into that world yet, but I think that's kind of where we see things going. I think a lot of it's going to be going into that direction as well, which is, I mean, the gaming industry is already exploding, so to add add those guys into visual effects and into the film business is like
Yeah,
there's a lot of jobs coming up.
I mean, I do tutorials for virtual reality stuff, Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and all that, and I just love it. I love all the new tool sets, and I love digging in.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun to take advantage, especially the big one with Substance Designer, Substance Painter. Even though a lot of you guys in visual effects use, I forgot the name of the programmer, Mari, yeah, Mari. And of course, one of the reasons why they use Mari is, paint across UDIMs or, high resolution textures above, because Substance Painter can only handle like 4K, and they have experimental 8K now, but it never renders, it always crashes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just even that stuff, these software packages that people used to not get their hands on are now getting their hands on it and so forth, and it's just growing exponentially through the process. But I mean, so obviously with this increase of all these visual effects houses and all these vendors and all these people working for these vendors and saying, I'm going to go and work on my own VFX house, I'm going to build it, you're seeing no like stall, or you're not seeing anything, you're not seeing like an emergency or like caution, beware of the future type.
I, it's a hard thing because um, there's as you know, I mean, you've interviewed other people, the hours and time and stress that people put into this type of industry. You sort of need to balance. There's a supply and demand, so you don't want people coming in and then getting paid almost minimum wage, but then having them work this crazy amount just because there's so much work that they can, and so many people coming out of school. But no, I think it's good that there's a lot of different studios popping up and people sort of doing their own thing. I don't think that sort of distracts from anything that has happened. And I think it provides a more, I dare I say, competitive environment as well, so that people have the ability to go to these smaller studios and be maybe more involved, or maybe try out a different area, where some of the bigger studios you're streamlined into sort of one role for quite a while.
Let's take a look at your IMDb over here and kind of start from the beginning here. So
Yeah.
2010 was the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2009. I got a job at Soho VFX, and the first thing I ever worked on was the Book of Eli. I think that's what it is on my
Incredible. I love the Book of
eye.
Eli. Uh,
It was. I mean, it was a tough project for people who had already been in the industry. There were some hiccups and deadlines and changes that happened late in the post production. But for someone new to the game, I mean, I was just excited to first be there. So all the extra hours and the extra stress, it sort of bounced off me, which maybe hardened me for the rest of my career. But it was a tough project, but it turned out very well, and I think it was received fairly well for being a lower budget film with a high star. But yeah,
yeah, I was. It was a. I mean, I rarely get moved, quote unquote, by films, but the ending was amazing.
yeah,
I thought it was just like, wow. I knew he was. I knew he was. For those, I'm not going to give it away, but there's a big ending, surprise ending.
yeah.
But I knew that already. But still, after that, I was like, oh my gosh, like awesome,
Mhm.
awesome ending. So, I mean, what did you do on the Book of Eli? Just curious. Um,
So it was everything. So it'd be comping full shots. Because it's a smaller studio, there wasn't a roto department and things like that. And I think the reason I got a job so easily is a lot of my student reel was, as I said, focusing on changing the sky from a clear day, adding in some clouds and sort of subtle effects that showed off these skills that were essential for visual effects. But I wasn't trying to do like these big explosions and CG robots and things like that, because when you get a job, you're not going to be doing that right away. So I sort of catered my reel to that entry level, thinking I was going to do some roto or stuff like that. So for the Book of Eli, I was doing full shots in the beginning, and the majority of the movie was replacing the sky, as well as a lot of foliage and trees and things like that, because it's this sort of
that's one of
way
the
in the
most
future.
highly graded movies I think I've ever seen. So I'm guessing you guys
Yeah.
neutral graded it, and then they put in that heavy desaturation and all
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah, they went strong, and I remember initially um, when we were doing it, so we had to replace every sky in the movie because it was post-apocalyptic, and then we had to remove any big trees and things like that. But then the reason that it sort of got really hard at the end is the director decided last minute that instead of going down and leaving the horizon intact, he was like, nah, you know what, we're gonna remove everything, like all foliage, all the way down to the horizon. So all the rotor work that was done 6 weeks before it was due to deliver, we had to go through every shot, and there was, I don't remember how many, but it was quite a few, and remove all the shrubs and everything that was all the way down to the bottom. So that's the reason why it was a lot of work. And then, as I said, in terms of my part, it was replacing the sky, removing all the vegetated, plants and trees and things like that in the background, doing patchwork and
Talk about a last minute
Um,
call, huh? Oh, by the way, let's get rid of all the trees and all the plants and all
yeah,
that.
they're just looking at it and they do their test screenings of the studios and they decided, it was just better this way. So yeah, I mean that was, as I said, it was a very great movie for me to really dive in on the fundamentals of the compositing world, which wasn't these big huge explosions. I mean, there was a few shots that had some big 3D stuff
You
and some
can't.
big
There's
mount.
just no way as a beginning artist that you can jump into these exploding shots. You need to have the
No, like
fundamentals.
it's yeah. So I mean, as I said, yeah, a lot of the movie was the fundamental stuff, and I think that's what it really helped me moving forward.
So you got the A Team, Night and Day.
Yeah,
Anything you want to talk
yeah,
about? Some of these, like some of
yeah.
these.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Night and Day was the first movie that I really had a big effect, like a big visual effects shot. And I think it's in my reel, but it's the scene where Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz are in this car, and I think they just killed the driver or something like that, knocked him out, and the car's going down the tunnel, and then it hits another car, and the cars start flipping, and there's this big transport trailer that's coming and smashing the car. So it was all shot in this green screen studio. So it was the first time that I really was given the opportunity to comp CG vehicles and debris and work with, the FX department and matte painting and to work with all the different departments in the studio. So that was a
I was looking at that. I'm like, wow, this is his first year in compositing, and this is like this massive shot that looks like something out of. I would equate it to the shot in Transformers where the Transformer flies over the girl. I mean, it's that
yeah,
massive of a shot. It's not some little tiny
yeah.
shot. I mean, it's a full sort of pan and track around a car. I mean, it's pretty nuts.
I had a lot of support from there was two visual effects supervisors that were working at Soho at the time. I was really friendly with everyone that worked there. We're such a great group of people, but especially the visual effects supervisors really helped me out where I needed help and sat down and gave me the opportunity to learn from them on where I needed to improve on each of the shots. So that really helped me out, and they've gone on to do different studios and bigger things, but we still keep in touch. So I said it was that was a big pivotal pivotal part of my career was sort of getting that CG experience and work.
I got to be under Rob Churchill, who works now. I think he's at Carbon VFX, and he has his own production company. But he was the one that kind of like mentored me through the Sam Jackson commercials and so forth. And we would spend like an extra hour or two after the day was supposedly over, and he would just sit there and just the meticulousness, just see the guy. And he was actually working on his own independent film. Like after work, he'd
Yeah,
still be there working on his independent film that he made. And a
yeah,
guy was just like pure, workhorse artist, man. He just wanted to create like an addiction. And it was really awesome to very very well mannered and very nice guy and just a great mentor to work under, man. It's just you work with these great artists. I believe I could be wrong about this, but I believe he was supposed to be like the editor or something on Titanic, but he turned it down or something. I
yeah.
don't know. It was really weird. I was like, he was going to work on some big part of Titanic, and he had to chose to turn it down. So it was really really weird. But yeah, when you get to work with some of these guys, and that's where it is. It's not a visual effects school, even though it's good to have a teacher that's
Yeah.
experienced, above you, showing you stuff. But when you get into those guys and they're mentoring you, that's where the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me. And is I guess as we're name dropping, so the guy that really took me under, his name's Brian Smeal, and I think now he's VFX supervisor at DD in Vancouver. Some of these, he's off doing Marvel movies and doing all the great stuff that they're doing there. But there's people that you meet along the way that you really sort of click with, and they love the industry and working on stuff so much that they're taking the time, yeah, as you said, after the day or whenever, and really sitting down and helping people, be the best that they can be. And as I said, it went a long way for me in particular, but I know that he takes a lot of people and helps a lot of people out.
The so we got Cats and Dogs: The Revenge of Kitty Galore. Big
Yeah.
Mamas, Like Father, Like Son, Red Riding Hood, Final Destination 5. Are they still making
Yeah.
those?
I think there was another one after that. I'm not sure. But it's funny because you work on some of these movies and then they get released somewhat out of order from what they are. I think Cats and Dogs was right after the Book of Eli, which was great, and I loved working on that movie because it was so laid back. But that was the movie that we transitioned from Apple Shake. I think it was that movie. We were using Apple Shake at the beginning for Book of Eli, and then we moved over to Nuke. And I think Cats and Dogs is where we decided to make that move at the studio. But that was it's just a fun, relaxing, not too serious kind of movie that turned out well, I guess. I saw the first one and it was good, so I was like, okay.
Cats. Yeah. Sometimes you get those, you get those projects that are like, but then you have better time on those. Believe it or not, some people might,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
critically acclaimed, but at the same time, a fun film to work on.
yeah.
Like I said, I had one student in mind. He worked on Avatar, so it was the most miserable experience he ever had.
Yeah. Well, we're fast forwarding a bit, but I was I received a call from a studio, and I'm not going to name names at this point, but they called me on a Saturday afternoon, and they said, hey, we got Game of Thrones. We would love you to come work on it. And I was like, yeah, because sometimes when you work on a project, it kind of ruins the movie because you have a bad time with it. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then she's like, we need you to come in tomorrow. And being Sunday, I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Getting a call on a Saturday to come in on a Sunday usually isn't a good sign. So
We're
yeah, I took a step back on that one. But I've had other friends who, one of my friends wanted really bad to just work on a Harry Potter movie, and he was offered a much more money in a different film in, I think it was Australia at Weta, or New Zealand at Weta. But he ended up going to London to work on Harry Potter just because that's really the movie he wanted to do. So yeah, every project's different.
I don't know. I was actually. Is it hard for people from the States to get over to Canada, or do you really have to have an impressive reel? Like you have to be really, really
Yeah,
impressive.
I mean, as I think it's the same with going from Canada to the United States, where you have to have some experience, and then there's the whole visa process that I'm not, I haven't gone through it. I know when I was at Rocket Science, there was this guy, he was an American citizen that was working with us, and he was really good. But I know that the process for getting people is not as quick as production companies would like. So I don't think that there's ever a chance that they're going to take someone that is out of school, just because, when they're ramping up or they need people quick, they don't want to have to wait 3 months or even 6 weeks for a visa process. I don't know how long it takes, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to be established before you can start.
I was trying to jump over to studios, and I got some. There was a guy, a really nice guy from Weta Digital, who I said, yeah, I'm just looking around to see
Hmm.
if I can get more experience so that I could teach it back to community. And he said, you know what, I'm going to put in a word for you at MPC, the HR at MPC in I think it was Montreal, and then also DNEG in London. So here's their contacts. I've already emailed them. And so I'm like, oh, cool. So then I brushed up my reel, sent it off to both locations with, referring to the person that, stated it directly to their email, not to some general email for employment, and not a single word. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Not even with a reference do you get a word back. You know what I mean?
it's weird like that. I mean, even for me, if I wanted to get a job at some places, I know I'm a bit more fortunate. I've had more people asking me to come work for them than I've had to apply. I don't think I've applied for a job since Soho,
That's
really.
what seems to be the pattern. You get in, and then everything is, hey, come on over here. You're pulled.
Yeah,
You're not screaming for work.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But if I was looking for work, at this point, I do know so many people in the industry that I would just sort of reach out to some of my friends and say, hey, what are you guys working on? I'm kind of looking for something. And that would be kind of the, I guess, application.
We have way too much oversight. I believe right now we have way too many, too little amount of VFX houses in Chicago. We had a couple close. We had Method close. We had I forgot what other one closed. But we have a very small amount, but with a crap load of artists running around, and just
Yeah.
unbelievable amount of artists. And I think it's I don't know. I'm trying to think of what city I could equate it to. Probably Reykjavik
Yeah, yeah.
at this
Well, it's
point.
funny enough is like everyone, they go off to Vancouver Film School or something from here, and then they go work. Either they get a job somewhere in Canada, or they're working in, London or something like that. Because people who are within Europe are free to work within Europe, so they're not having to apply for a visa in order to work in, say, Germany, or all those different places. So they go to Canada, or some other place for school. I mean, there's a few schools here that do visual effects, but Vancouver Film School is obviously a very popular one. So they go there, and then they go to
I've heard mixed review
NBC
on
or something.
Vancouver. I've heard
Yeah,
I
it's like
heard the old guard people that were there a long time ago were saying it's great. Now they're saying it's starting to get a little squishy. I
yeah.
don't know if that's true. I mean, all I ever hear about is Vancouver Film School, But from someone being from Canada, what do you see any emerging hotspots? I know there's been a shift from opportunity for starter uppers in Montreal versus Vancouver. Is there any other locations that are starting to come around or in that
I
area?
mean, I think it's all based on tax credits. To be honest, I think that's why Toronto is popular. Is Ontario gives a good tax credit. British Columbia with Vancouver, it's the same thing, and Montreal has stepped up their tax credit, and studios are opening up there. But also maybe they thought Montreal was an easier in terms of a time difference for European companies, to sort of set up shop there. But it's I think that's kind of, those are the three cities right now. I don't think there's going to be any big hotspots. Although I keep hearing rumblings of sort of mid Canada. I think it's like Alberta or somewhere where they have like a lot of game development going on, um, in like Calgary or something like that. Like Rockstar Games has like I'm not big in the game world, but I think I remember hearing something about that. But no, I mean, I think the three cities in terms of film, TV, visual effects, I think that's where it's going to be until it's oversaturated at some point. It can't keep growing. So until that happens, it'll just sort of stay those three.
I got a student of mine when I taught game. He's I won't say his name, but he's like a legendary environment artist now, and he I think he's at NVIDIA,
Mhm.
and he was the lead at trying to remember the guys that made Blizzard Entertainment,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so forth. And he is I'm just like watching an interview with him lately. I was just like, look, he's so jaded. He's like unbelievably jaded. I'm like, that's not the young man,
yeah,
I was patting on the back in the day. You know what I mean? Who was
yeah,
so it's funny you reflect on students and you being a teacher too. You are a teacher, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, you just see these
yeah, yeah.
kids that are
So
like the most insecure kids are the ones that are most successful. You know what I mean? They're just like so like I'll
yeah,
never make it. I'm like you'll be fine.
yeah. It's like it's yeah. And I was talking, as I said, I was, because of the opening film at Riff. I was sitting down with the director and the lead actor yesterday, from the movie End of Sentence, and we were kind of just talking about, it's a certain type of person that really makes it in this type of business. And I remember when I was going through school, there was the people who, looking back, weren't sort of that type. They never really established themselves in the industry, whereas the group that did have that sort of personality type really made it. I don't want to discourage anyone watching this from pursuing their passion. Um, but another big thing is determination, and sort of the drive to do it. When I was teaching, I was invited to come back to Durham College and teach a new program that they were putting together, that just revolved all around visual effects. And they wanted me to come and do the compositing course. And what I said to all the students is, towards the end, they had great reels, and I said, even if you don't get a job, within the first 2-3 months, keep trying, because studios are going to hire in waves, and maybe typically, as people are graduating, is a bit more of a downtime, which sucks for students. but the summer months, typically they've already hired and they're finishing projects, and then they'll ramp back up maybe in the fall for some stuff that's happening there. So I said, don't give up. Within a year, you guys are all going to have jobs if you keep at it. And I think almost all of them did that I taught. Not to pat myself on the back too hard, but yeah, I mean, they worked at it, and we kept in contact and sort of helped out. I never sent names though. It's because I always want people to sort of establish themselves, but helping them on their reel and making it the best that they could, I think that's what helped. I will tell I will say that there's sort of this mixed type because for me, when it comes to work, I'm very extroverted. I really go out and I put myself out there. But then if I'm socializing at a party, I don't really know anyone. I'm not running around talking to everyone. So I would say that you need to be, as I said, driven. And if you're a little shy, that's fine. But when it comes to promoting yourself or talking to people in sort of the business, if you're at a party and you're a student and there's a couple people there who have worked on some films, don't be afraid to go up and just congratulate them on the good work. Introduce yourself. Don't make it weird, but you say hi and congratulations on the great job, blah blah blah, and then see if the conversation goes from there. And if not, then at least you've introduced yourself and you're getting used to doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, you get the extroverts, which are like, I want a job.
yeah, exactly. They don't want to, they don't want to. But the thing that you said about teaching as well is I remember the first class I ever did, because I always taught as well as while I was working. So I would teach in the morning and then go off to the studio afterwards. But the first class I ever taught, I realized it didn't, the students didn't really know how bad it went, but when I was sort of doing it and looking back, it was just so terrible that I decided to start learning how to teach better. So I went and I did this teaching adults certificate online course, and then I got my BA in adult education just because I knew while I was teaching I didn't want to do injustice to these kids who were paying all this money. It's a lot of money for tuition. I didn't want to give them a subpar education. And so I went to school and I got a BA in teaching adults, just so that I could be a better teacher for them. All while I was also at the studio doing the work.
How early were you teaching these kids to have time to go work at a studio? Was this 6 in the morning or something? Or?
It was 8 a.m. So yeah, I would teach from 8 till 10, I think, and then I would drive into the studio and just work until the evening. And then I would go home when I was doing the BA as well. Then I would go home and I would never get home before 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which hopefully doesn't deter too many people from getting in the industry. So I'd get home at 8 or 9 o'clock. I'd have some dinner, relax for maybe a half hour, and then I would start on the university stuff that I was doing. So it was a busy couple of years of my life. But
I bet. Yeah, when everyone does the college and you're doing college and teaching and working at a studio.
Yeah. It was a busy time.
But yeah, you as a teacher, you can feel the weight of these kids are looking at me with a $60,000 to $50,000 price tag, American dollars, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're looking at them going, and they're like, "You're my only hope."
Yeah.
That's weighty.
That's why I went back, and I had to bring something more to the table, and I learned how to do that to be better for them, and hopefully it paid off.
It sounds like it did. So back to the films here, you got In Time, Ghost Rider, Darkest Hour. I'm sorry if I kind of rushed through these because
No, it's fine.
I'll throw a couple titles in if you have anything you want to share. Abraham Lincoln, Resident Evil, Jack the Giant Slayer, Copper Skate.
Jack the Giant Slayer. That's actually one we could pause for a second, because that was the first film. I was still at Soho at the time, but that was the first film that we were sharing assets or receiving assets from other companies. So for that, there was a lot of stuff where DD, I think it was DD, so sorry if that was not DD, but another company was doing the Giants, and we were doing some other stuff with the castle, and there was some fire and stuff. So they would send us their giant assets to comp into our shots and then send. So that was the first time that I had experience working with other vendors from an artist level.
Does the time difference weigh in pretty heavy when you're cross collaborating, matching, and sharing assets with studios that are in Europe? I mean, does that get kind of crazy, especially a time difference? Or
Well, with that one, they were in Vancouver, so I mean, it was still a three hour difference for the Vancouver studio there. But no, it's pretty good. It also helped, depending on which direction the time's going. Whereas you go to this studio and you know that you have like 2 hours or 3 hours before LA or someone's going to wake up, and so you're feeling good that you have a little bit of time in the morning to just get fresh eyes on it before you have to do a CineSync or something like that. But no, it's generally the time doesn't really play a big factor. Um,
Skating in New York, The Best Man Holiday, Christmas in Conway, Horizon, Pompeii, Vikings, The Captive. Anything
yeah,
memorable from?
yeah. I mean, the Christmas in Conway, I think it was interesting to me because that was a movie that was made for TV, and Hallmark actually makes that movie, so they're the money behind it. And I remember questioning, and that was when I was at Rocket Science, and I was talking to one of the owners and visual effects guys. I was like, "Why is Hallmark making a movie?" And he was like, "It's just to sell cards." He was like, "They do one every year, sort of thing." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I thought it was the strangest thing, but again,
Saturday Night Live
it
did
was
a
pretty.
parody of how many movies the Hallmark Channel puts out. I don't know if you've seen that.
It's, we don't have the Hallmark Channel in Canada, so I had no idea that they were doing these these movies
It's usually boy meets
until
girl,
that.
boy meets girl during the summer or the Christmas holiday, falls in love. It's just they just pump them out like crazy during the holidays. So it sounds like there's
Yeah,
a lot of like films that would probably be not so heavy VFX wise, but more like
yeah,
meticulous
exactly.
stuff.
It's general. Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of shots, but it's more again fundamental stuff like green screen and wire cleanups, things like that. It's not too much of a stretch. I find having done stuff like Night and Day or some other CG elements. When we get in talking about Expanse and stuff like that, it's the fundamental stuff is really what can be really tricky because when you're getting a CG element, a lot of the hard work is already done for you. You're kind of just slapping it together and making it kind of look like it fits in there. But doing a really good key off of someone who's got a lot of hair and there's little strands and or whatever clothing or motion blur, preserving all the detail, or even as I said, wire removal and stuff like that. Like it's so difficult sometimes to get those really good. Whereas CG elements, sometimes you just kind of pop them in and it looked great. So
So we're looking at Fargo, the TV series, Revolution, Vikings, The Captive. I'm kind of moving my way up here. I know I'm going through some memories fast here, but John Wick, the
yeah, that
legendary
one.
John Wick.
I mean, that one again. It was a lot of just simple stuff. Where I mean, that movie doesn't have a lot of big visual effects. It's a lot of gun stuff with muzzle flashes and people getting hit and blood and cleanups and things like that. So it was just it was kind of a fun movie. But the directors on that one, they were very particular about how things were going to look. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that they were originally a stunt team, or they came from a background in terms of stunt work or something like that. So they knew what they were talking about. They knew exactly what they were looking for. So on that one, it was very important that certain things looked a very certain way. Whereas I've done muzzle flashes before where they were just like, yeah, just throw it in. But this one was a bit different. And it was a fun movie to work on. I remember doing it, and I didn't think it was going to be a big movie at all. I was just like, it's a shooter movie with Keanu Reeves. How big could it get? And then because you never see the full movie, and so maybe people don't realize that who haven't worked on it is you just see these little clips of the sections that you're working on. Maybe sometimes you'll get a bit longer of an edit to sort of see the context, but typically you're looking at just a few minutes of the movie for the small section that you're working on, and not all the time. It doesn't even have audio. There's no color grade sometimes. So
Yeah, you're just
I'm
sort of
looking at
like
that.
you see a window into the future in a way when you go into these
Yeah.
studios. You're like, this film will be out in a year, and you're like, what is this? You know what I mean? It's almost
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
we're
So
about
you know,
to, go ahead.
I didn't think that movie was going to be this big thing. And I'm glad it was. You know, but it was a fun movie to work on. There was nothing too difficult about the work that we did.
So they were just very specific about the gun what do you call those gun flares or whatever?
Yeah, muzzle
Muzzle
flashes and things
flashes.
like
That's
that.
it, yeah, gun flares. Okay. So they did a
Yeah.
so they did a Hannibal TV series.
Yeah, so that actually is what you know. There's a couple of shows before that, so I'll get into sort of this nomination talk now. Um, as I was nominated for two Canadian Screen Awards, which is not it's I guess it's big in Canada. But I was nominated one for this TV show, it was like Wet Bum, but I think they changed the title since then. But then, so I was nominated for the movie Wet Bum, and then I was nominated for the TV show called Copper for the Canadian Screen Awards. But then Hannibal, that was the first time that I was really on set regularly for the production, as well as working on it and helping oversee the sequences and sort of helping with that process. So that show was a big turning point for me to not only work on something and have a little bit more artistic freedom, but also dive into the world of on-set visual effects supervision alongside with the VFX supervisor for the show, Robert Crowther, who's on to the Expanse now, as well as another owner from Rocket Science who was overseeing the visual effects. But it was, as I said, for that one, 3 seasons of on-set and then helping out sort of ended up with an Emmy nomination for that show, which was fantastic.
We kind of skipped over. What was your, change from Soho VFX over to Rocket?
I'm trying to remember what the movie was or the TV show. It might have been around Hannibal. It's funny because sometimes I forget some of the things that I've done.
That's what
So
every one of my guests says. Every one of them. They're like,
yeah,
I mean,
it's
I
like
interviewed Steve Wright. He's like, what?
yeah, it's like,
oh yeah, wow,
there's all
Wayback
these little.
Machine,
But the other, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like an annoying thing, but one thing that people might not realize is, I've done a lot of work, or not a lot, but I've done, tests for movies that have just never happened, or we've done pilots that just got shelved, so you work on something for 5-6 months, and then the studio's like, it was great, but it's not really going to work right now. And so, the work just is never shown, and so it's never released.
I worked on 2 video games, and both of them got canceled. It was like the ultimate smack across the face,
It just sort of happens. Yeah, so my shift from Soho over to Rocket Science, I think the captive, the TV show Copper, I think that was kind of around. Yeah, so it was right after, yeah, Resident Evil and Jack Giant Slayer. I remember, I don't think it's on my IMDb, but there was this TV show, it was a kids TV show that Soho was doing, and I think it was the last thing I worked on there. It was a TV show for kids called the Beat Party, and it was like a 2-minute or 3-minute animated thing about these vegetables that beatboxed. It was like, and so I remember that was the last thing I worked at Soho, and then I went over to Rocket Science. And again, it's not an intentional thing, but Soho had grown to, I think it was over 100 people when I left, and I moved in and went to Rocket Science, which is a small studio again. But it's not like I'm seeking out these sort of shops. But I talk to people, and when you get along with the people who are running the studio that they are, and some of the people there, I find having a good team around you is so much more important than the projects that I'm working on. So I think that's kind of what really drew me over to Rocket Science, and it was for Copper and Captive. It was around that time.
So Paradise Pictures, and then we have the Incredible Expanse, which I have not seen yet. All I've been told was how great it was. So, and this was the first season.
Yeah, so there's the first season. I remember a lot of tests were done. I mean, the work is split amongst a few different studios in Toronto, and I remember when they were pitching that idea, um, the producers at Rocket Science, he was like rushing out. He's reading all the books that did the best job that they can. So he read through the books, and I think partly was to get a feel to be on the same page with everyone that's on the production side, so that they're more comfortable on the direction that Rocket Science wants to take with it. But also, each studio had a different a different ship, and it seemed like in the first season, and I hope there's no spoilers, but there's always like ships getting blown up, and so if you're working on a ship and it gets blown up after 2 episodes, it's a much different paycheck in terms of when you're thinking about it from a producer standpoint than a ship that lasts the entire season. So it was challenging in that regard because there's so much 3D work that went into it for the 3D team, and then the comp. It was it's pretty straightforward for comping when it's a 100% CG shot, whereas the stuff that had green screen and a lot of stuff like that, in addition to 3D, was more complex. But yeah, so it was season 1, and then I think season 2 started after I left.
What are they see? What season are they
Or
on
there might have
now?
been some carryover into season.
I think it's
They're
like
going into season 5.
5. That's right. Yeah, he was telling me that. Yeah.
So Amazon picked them up for season 4, rescued them from cancellation, and then season 4 went really well for Amazon. So they're going into season 5.
Wasn't there a campaign to get
Yeah.
Expanse? There was. That's what my friend was telling me. Like everyone was so wanting to see the seasons continue that they like the entire community like stood up and said, what's going on here?
And it's when we were working on that, I remember I had at that time when I was working on the Expanse, I had gone to Comic-Con for a few years in a row, and I remember I went down there, and the producer said to me, like, can you go to the Expanse panel, because it was the first time that they were going to show the Expanse at Comic-Con. So I went in. I had no idea, but the reception was amazing, and I was like, wow, like people really love the source material, and it's based off books, and it worked out really well. So here we are, season 5, and it's going really well for them. It's good. It's a strong fan base.
One thing I was going to ask you with the experience that you have, what's your opinion or mindset or caution maybe in regards to keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, as far as the tech and the technique and so forth? Is that a reality? If you disappear for 2 years, are you in trouble? Like, I mean, what would your opinion be on that as far as like re-entering and exiting and re-entering?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to keep up with what's going on. I mean, it was a very quick change. I remember going from always asking people from the 3D department to give us camera tracks, which they would export a 3D camera so that we can do some work inside of Nuke. It quickly went from that pipeline sort of flow to us using the internal tools inside of Nuke to do our own camera tracks and start creating our own geometry. And I know on some of the Marvel movies that they're using Nuke particles to do some amazing particle work. And so if you had disappeared for 2 years or even a year maybe, while that sort of shift was happening, you'd come back and you'd have to either try and catch up really quick, or I guess or worse. So it's always really good to keep kind of one foot in and keep up with the tools. And programs like Nuke, I mean, they have a free edition for students, I think, personal learning kind of edition. So it's not hard to keep up with the stuff there, because I know, even since the past couple of years, things have changed a lot with the way that people comp.
Well, only
And
in just a few days, they released Nuke 12, and some of the tools
yeah,
I'm looking at, I'm like, wow, look, clean up to
yeah.
snap, you know.
Yeah, as one of the things that always plagued me as a compositor was grid warping and tracking, the grid on. And then I look at Nuke 12 and they have
Yeah, they got it
this
together
grid
now.
that like moves, and I'm like, oh my god, it's one of the best best things.
I was thinking
Because
about putting together like a course on my YouTube channel by digging into that, and then I think it's called the something paint tool. I haven't
yeah,
officially looked at 12 yet, but I mean I'm looking at the Foundry videos, and I'm just like, well, look at that. Where's that? That should
yeah,
have been there 5 years ago.
yeah, it's amazing. I remember I hated Nuke the first time I ever used it. I forget what version it was. But I knew Shake worked so well for me, except the fact that Shake, if I remember correctly, it kept crashing if you tried to undo more than once or twice, which was annoying. But Nuke was even worse. And then I remember especially the grid warp, it was just unusable. And then they go through and they improve it, and it gets better and better. The unfortunate thing I will say is it's a very expensive piece of software. But they have cloud platforms now to make it easier to sort of ramp up and ramp down. Makes it a bit more affordable. And then there's also graduating students can get a discount. But if you're independent and you're not in school and you don't want to use Nuke, I mean, there's other options like Fusion and stuff like that. But unfortunately, Nuke is sort of the software if you're going into compositing specifically. That's the one to learn, and the tools and things that they're putting out are things to keep an eye on, whether or not you're using it or not.
Well, I was going to say, as we're kind of coming to the end of your filmography here, I see Sensitive Skin, Hell on Wheels, Rapture, and then this is the film that is at the festival, End of Sentence.
Yeah.
Um,
So
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, so that one, when I moved to Iceland, it was I sort of sent an email to everyone, just sort of shake hands, say, hey, I'm in town, that sort of thing, and then didn't think of it. And then this company called me and they said, hey, we got this movie, this director's first big film. Can you come and lend a hand on sort of overseeing what we're doing and making sure that everything's kind of at the level that you're used to? So I went in and sat down with the guys there, and some of the comp artists and stuff are sitting in as I'm sort of cutting up their work, which is, it's a hard thing to do the first time that you do it, but once you get used to it and you've been in the studio for a while, especially having received a lot of criticisms about my work internally, you get to know that it's not at you, it's only going to strengthen the work that you're putting out. So having never met the artists, I'm sitting there telling them what they can do to make it better. And then I ended up with this great film that was, again, it's not VFX heavy, but there was a lot of stuff that needed to be done to bring it up to where it is.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of my students, they've worked as leads at the mill and so forth, and then now they're consultants. They're full-time consultants with their own business. And I find that to be another transition I've noticed, not just working freelance gigs. Being the fact that we've had a lot of profits on our show, do you believe in the prophetic word here that we're all going to be working remotely someday? And do you have like a time frame when that is, or is that just still in la la land for now? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky because I remember when I was at Soho, I think it was Marvel or Disney, or like there was some movie, and I think it may have been for Ghost Rider, that the security team at Marvel came to Toronto and looked at the studio and said, hey, if you want to get some of our projects, you got to implement these things. And the security is outrageous. I had left Soho, but then they got some work on, I think it was the Avengers or Iron Man or something, one of those movies. And my friend was there, and he was saying that they couldn't have their phone with them when they went. So I think there's still a long ways to go in terms of remote work for those types of movies where they really want to keep it hush-hush. But if you look at, DD and Pixamundo and stuff like that, they have offices around the world, and they're sharing work sometimes across their facilities. So, we're going in the right direction. And as I said, the Foundry has like their cloud remote platform that they put together. So I think it's headed that way. Maybe not for all the work, but especially sort of these smaller ones. I think there's a lot of opportunities.
We should be calling up George Orwell in regards to like they're gonna have 10 cameras on every artist if they're working remotely, as opposed to the studio as one whole being working remotely. Or
Yeah, I remember when I got to Soho, I think it was the Wolverine movie or something. Someone leaked like an early version of the film that had a lot of the visuals not finished, and that was a big deal. And it's you know as I was talking to the director of Independence yesterday, as I was saying, and one of the things that a lot of the directors that I've talked to have said is, they want to showcase the best film that they can, because once they release it, or once it's out there, it's not their movie anymore. It's the world's movie. And sort of having something that's half finished released, it makes you feel kind of bad when people start talking about how maybe it doesn't look good or something like that because you're not done with it, and you haven't had a chance to sort of put everything in that you wanted to. So I think that's the security part is, people get excited and they want to be able to show what they're working on to people on the internet or, friends, blah, blah, blah. The confidentiality it's always going to be a big thing, I think, in this industry. So being remote is a tricky thing.
so where you're at now. Are you planning on? I know you're kind of. Are you basically taking a little bit of a break and enjoying the beautiful scenery around you? Do you plan on? Are you still? I'm assuming just working remotely on these large projects. And do you have any aspirations to head back to Vancouver or I'm not at Vancouver, but like Ontario area and all that? Or
I mean, no, not at this moment. As I said, when Expanse got season 4 renewed, I talked to my friend, and he was like, "Hey, if you want to come back, we'd love to have you," sort of thing. And then I had the other week, one of the big companies in London messaged me on LinkedIn, asking me if I wanted to come work for them. But I think right now, I like working on sort of these smaller projects because it gives me a chance to more explore different avenues. As I said earlier, when you're working at these big studios, you're doing this one job, whether it's you're starting out, you're doing roto or blah, blah, blah. But when you're working in smaller studios, you have an opportunity to do things like go on set and talk to directors and sort of do this collaboration. And so I think I'm going to continue doing that. And in Iceland, it's an even more, I guess, tight-knit community of that sort of thing here. Plus, a lot of things film here, so it's a good opportunity to sort of expand my resume in a new direction rather than comp work. Start meeting people that are filming here. As I said, End of Sentence, although it wasn't filmed here, the director's from here, and the lead actor was nominated for an Academy Award, and things like that. And then, in Iceland, we have Netflix showing more and more of an interest, and they're putting out some good stuff. Will Ferrell, I think, is in the country right now shooting some stuff, and George Clooney's here shooting some stuff. So, there's a lot of opportunities to expand in a new direction for me. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking to explore a bit more.
Mr. Savella, he was working on George Clooney's Catch 22, I think it was, or so I don't know if they're making another sequel to that. Maybe that's what it is that they're filming out there. Or maybe it's a whole other film for him or something.
Yeah, I forget the title. It's like something about some sort of scientist. But I think it's a new production. And then Will Ferrell's doing a movie based around Eurovision, which is not big in North America, but here it's massive. So it's a song contest. So his movie is revolving around that.
Cool. So did you manage to pick up Icelandic language? Or
It's a difficult thing to learn. If it's the longer I'm here, the more I realize that people who only speak English are really lazy, because I meet people and they're like, "Oh, I only speak 4 languages" or something. But I'm I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But everyone here speaks English, and so it's super easy to communicate with everyone.
So let's take a look at your reel. Just heading over to your website here again. You got awesome little. Is it to me, or as I've seen a couple other people kind of conform their websites to have this sort of movie poster feel to them? Is that something you'd recommend? Or
I don't know. I just felt like I had this .com for a long time, ever since I was in school, and I sometimes forget to update it. So it's like nothing goes for like 2 years, and I'm like, I should maybe throw it. But yeah, I mean, you never know what to put if it's just like, if you go to the website and it's only the reel, or I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. When you're applying for jobs and stuff like that, you can send a Vimeo link, and people are happy with that. So you don't even need a website.
It's nice. It's a nice looking website.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to take a look at Rob's reel. It's again robtasker.com/demo-reel, and we'll take one quick glance at it, and then we'll go through it. And of course, this is the part of the show that everybody loves, because we can start to tear apart, how these shots were accomplished, and it's a learning experience for everybody. So let's go ahead and play it through here. Again, we just have the sound down.
Yeah, so I think I'll just go over which shows there are, and then we'll go back. But this one was Resident Evil, Hannibal. Now, there's a lot of Hannibal in this reel, I think. It's been a few years since I put it together, so sometimes it's always hard to remember exactly what's in it. There's another Hannibal shot. Again, the same sort of thing.
And that's the big money shot.
Then we get to Night and Day. Yeah, so that was my first big one. And everything on that is CG, pretty much except for the inside of the car. Then we move on to Pompeii. This is Giant Slayer. This one, again, I always forget what it's called, but it's a TV show about vampires. What was this one? Yeah, see, I forget. I'm going to look them up and refresh my memory as it's playing, so that when we go through it, then I can actually give you the names of the projects.
Yeah, if you want to switch back to IMDB,
Yeah, I mean, I have it open. I'll just go back to my IMDb, because I don't want to say it's one project or it's not.
Oh, by the way, if anybody watching, this gets pretty squeamish at this point. Just to let you know.
Yeah. It's the funny thing is I actually learned recently how they really do LASIK operations on people, and it's much worse than what you actually saw in that on the Final Destination. That one's Darkest Hour.
If the economy were to collapse and you can no longer get your contact lenses, because I have torics, and if I put glasses on, I get a headache in 5 minutes, and it feels all warped. So I'm like, if the world ended tomorrow, I would be blind.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like get it done before the economy collapses or something.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of. It's just amazing, all these little things. You just.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part when you're putting together a reel is you really want to have these breakdowns, but you don't always get that. You just get this end result. And if I was a better person to put together a demo reel, as I said, I haven't really needed a demo reel for a while. This is just in case someone wants to see some of my work. But if you're in a position where you're applying for jobs with a reel, having breakdowns, if you have them in terms of the visuals, or a sheet that goes down what you did and what is involved, I think is key.
And also not stepping out anybody's toes. That might have worked on this shot as well. Yeah. So just kind of going through it, and by all means, don't my YouTube channel. I think we're approaching 9,000 subscribers, but I can tell you those subscribers are ready for the meat and potatoes of compositing. Is this the first Resident Evil movie, or is this the Resident Evil like a TV show, or there's so many Resident Evils?
This is from Resident Evil Retribution, and I'm looking at my IMDb at the same time just to make sure I get the titles right. So this was a movie, and they've done. I think they did all of the Resident movies. They filmed all of them in Toronto. The director just loves the city. So the
Anderson, right? Something Paul
right.
Something Anderson, not Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah, and so the main vendor on this show is, I believe, Mr. X. They are the ones who have been working on the Resident Evil series since the beginning. And then we were at Soho, and we got a little bit of the overflow. And this is one of the shots. So the 3D department did all of these sort of submarines and stuff that you see in the background, and then 2D cards of smoke, and there's some 3D smoke, and the railings. Some of the railings were 3D. So it was a lot of roto, and using cards, 3D cards in Nuke, and we were starting at this point back in 2011 is when we started experimenting with Nuke's 3D system at Soho, and learning how we can use that in a way that makes it easier to do things like move this smoke in 3D space without having to have some element that's just scaled that you're having to track in, but you can use the camera that's available from the 3D department.
That's pretty much why everybody took the jump from Shake to Nuke, was the 3D elements, the 3D aspect of putting in cards for, just one example of kind of getting...
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, it's not, I don't know if any of the shots are on my reel, but one of the big things for me that I absolutely love about Nuke is tracking something with a 3D camera. And if you're doing wire removal, is you just paint one frame and then you use the 3D camera to track that in. And if you need to make adjustments, it's so much easier than the old way of trying to, do a 2D track, and it always looks a bit weird, and you're trying to fix mistakes along the edges and warping and things like that. But with the 3D, it's just so much better. But yeah, so this was one of the first shots that we started using the cards. It was a super heavy scene with the 3D assets, because we brought the 3D, like a low-res 3D asset into Nuke in order to position and sort of cut out sort of holdouts for all these smoke elements. So it was super heavy for that. I mean, Nuke has come a long way in terms of using 3D objects that are given to you.
Nuke
But I remember
12, I hear, is absolutely spectacular as far as dealing with heavy assets and heavy scenes. They did a whole demo where they were like, "Look how it's not choppy. We have 100,000 nodes."
Yeah, exactly, right. And the video cards are getting better and better.
It was needed.
And so everything's just getting, yeah.
Well, okay. So, question I have, and this is a common problem that I have, is like when you're trying to incorporate something to match to from a 3D tracked camera of a card in a shot. If you do get some sort of offset, either through lens distortion, not correctly pulled out or something, is there any quick fix that you use to kind of get it to kind of stick in there, like a 2D track addition, or is that?
No, not to, typically. Typically I've been pretty lucky with things working pretty well. I've never run into any of these big issues, especially with lens distortion. I mean, lenses that I think a lot of, especially newer people, don't think about. They film something, whether it's on their DSLR or whatever it is, but it's so important to know about lens distortion, putting it back on, and then when it comes to cards, putting it in. Yeah, as I said, like I've never had an issue with stuff. Sometimes the track's not 100%. I will say, even though the 3D, they give you the camera and it looks really great for all the elements that they've done, but for some reason, one of the cards that you put in just doesn't fit, as you said, and you need to manually, adjust the animation just a little bit. So there's stuff like that, but it's never in a situation that's so terrible that there's nothing that really pops out as being.
So it's not a matter of going in adjusting the keys of a 3D camera, or is it taking the 2D render out of the scan line and actually offsetting it through offset animation translation? Is it?
No, I go into the keys of the animation, and for Nuke there's access nodes and things like that. I'm very big into using expressions in Nuke, and so I always hate adjusting the values directly, because if I ever need to go back, I want to have that information. So I don't like playing with the keys that they've given me, as little as I can. So I always add an offset to the camera, and then I keyframe that. And there's access nodes, or you can make your own. There's a no op node in Nuke that I've used so many times, and it just allows me to create my own tool on the fly. And I do a lot of that when I need to do anything with expressions, or if I'm feeling lazy and I know that I have like 10 nodes and they all have the same thing, but I don't want to clone them. I just want to have one tool off to the side that has a bunch of controls for the stuff I want to do, and I use a node, build the tool that I want, and then connect it up, and use that as sort of like my primary modifier, I guess is what you say. But as I said, I am from more of a programming background as well, so I always liked going into that realm and diving into Nuke. And this is going a little bit off topic from the reel, but even when I was at Rocket Science, I was helping build tools that integrated with Shotgun better than what was available at the time. And so it was going from Nuke to Shotgun and making sure that the delivery process was smooth and versioning and iterations was all good. So I carry that programming stuff into Nuke and building tools to help with each shot.
And this shot right here is
Yeah, so it's Hannibal it was a fantastic set that they had, but the set sort of ends at the first ceiling, and then it was just a map painting / some 3D elements. But again, it was in Nuke, projecting onto, and then just extending, simple set extension, basically, just going up instead of towards the back, I guess.
So is this 3D geometry inside of Nuke that's being rendered through Scanline? Okay.
Yeah, and then we had the matte painting guys. They do 1 or 2 frames, depending, on these big camera moves. Sometimes you need 2 different frames that they painted, or they just, they paint sort of this curved-looking picture that you project on 2 frames. Yeah, I mean, depending on what it is. So they have, say like an early frame of the ceiling, and then they take the last frame, and then, when they're doing the matte painting, they piece that together, and they just give me one long painting, and then let me know which frames they preference. And that just makes it so that the scene between the 2 images is good. This one's the same sort of idea. This one, though, I believe was a render. But all of these do have an element of 3D in Nuke as well. Whereas, some of the stuff was rendered out from 3D department. I think the back wall was the 3D department, and the rest of it was in Nuke 3D.
Why is the sky green, if you don't mind me asking? I would have assumed this was the green screen or something.
No, it's just like, they sort of grade it. They grade it this way.
That's weird, yeah, because I'm waiting for a wipe to go by and show me the background. You know what I mean?
It's supposed to be, I believe it was like the stained glass window sort of thing. And it's modeled after an actual place in Italy, I believe. I forget the church. I mean, someone out there who's watching this might know what church it is, but yeah.
So this is 100% CG with a guy on a green screen.
Almost. There's a few pillars, and some of the elements on the lower part of the screen are real, but majority of that is CG. Although, so when you're looking at your own work, because you always know, like that shot there was particularly difficult to track. I remember the 3D guys had a hard time with some of the pillars, and then it ended up that they had to render one pillar separate from the rest of them because for some reason the camera track was looking good for everything except for one pillar. So they did.
And this is anamorphic footage, I'm assuming, right?
I don't remember if it was.
Because anamorphic is a pain in the rear end, especially getting rid of lens distortion, all that. And you really have to incorporate 3D equalizer to pull that stuff out. You can't use like nukes,
Yeah. It's it's hard, but I remember this one was particularly tricky because of some of the pillars were real, and there was discussion if we should just remove the pillar and make it CG, and then some of the directors, because it's not the same director for every single episode when you're on TV. It's they have directors that kind of shift. Maybe they do like episode 1, 3, 5, 7, that kind of thing.
How does that work? I mean, are they contacting your VFX supervisors saying, and you're getting a different director for every single shot, or?
No, well, it's each episode.
Depending on what show it's landing on?
Yeah, so if it's, whoever was directing this particular episode, and then the next episode was a different director. So most of the TV shows I worked on, I know Hannibal for sure had multiple directors for the episodes, and it just made it easier for them to focus on the stuff that they had to do. And then obviously, Brian Fuller, who is the showrunner, and he's the mastermind behind this, and he's overseeing all of that work. I mean, on top of everyone else. So it's, there's a lot of people who had their hands involved in this, and it was kind of like Hannibal was a baby for a lot of people, and I think they're still wanting to bring it back, but they just hasn't clicked quite yet.
What do you guys? Is this a 3D element rendered out of the? I'm curious. What were you guys rendering out of? What package? Is it like V-Ray or Arnold?
I think we were. I think this was around, I believe, V-Ray, because using multiple things. I know some shows. I don't even think it's on my IMDB, but we were doing these like smaller things, and there was some Mental Ray, and then there was like RenderMan in there, and Arnold Render. But I think going around this time of Hannibal, and then The Expanse, I believe it was going into V-Ray during that time.
It seems like it transitioned from Mental Ray RenderMan to V-Ray, and now it seems like the majority is Arnold, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how many people are getting into Redshift or anything, but or Octane or whatever those other ones are, but.
And then this next one with Soho, I know they use 3Delight, which is a RenderMan renderer for all of their stuff, and I believe they still use it. But I'm not 100% on that. It's been a while, but I know that when I was there, they were using RenderMan, and they were doing a lot of custom stuff for when they were rendering out of RenderMan. So okay, and then we're getting into these bigger shots. It's very night and day. So they were actually driving down, but a lot of the car, because of the rig that it's on, removing this rig, removing some of the people that are sort of around the car, and then adding in CG, obviously the CG car, the CG effects, but also a lot of the tunnel is CG and the reflections on the car. For the second shot where he's jumping into the car is 100% green screen. And they have this car that's on the set for the green screen, but none of the windows are there, and they just have this camera move. So the entire tunnel is CG. All the cars are CG. All the parts of the main car in terms of reflections and windows, that's all CG. It was a very difficult one, and again it was my first time dealing with so many assets and working with so many different departments that I learned a lot on this shot.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Just all the, and then of course you got what's called what does Tony Lyons call that gray matting, where you have to get the reflections on the glass and so forth. It's green screen, but
yeah,
there's yeah.
Yeah, as I said on this one, it was the CG department. We decided not even worry about any of the reflections from the original stuff, and just because the whole tunnel, it's all green screen, so all the reflections are digitally added in afterwards anyway.
Oh, so all these are okay. So everything here you see, yeah, obviously because they're not on a real.
Yeah.
I remember on a VFX supervision we had this for this film called Thrill Ride. We had I was VFX supervising the film, and we it was so low budget. I mean, it was a pretty big budget movie. It had some A-list actors in it and so forth, but we had we took like a almost like a what do you call that, zoetrope style thing with slits in it, and we put like just somebody like spinning it to make the light go through it. It was really really weird, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then we get to Pompeii. That was a really fun one as well. It was on a green screen, and then there was some matte painting and sort of ash elements that we added in, and then the sword. They don't. In this particular, it wasn't like a foam sword. It was just a handle, so the sword's fake, and just adding in it. I mean, it turned out really well. So. That's kind of what it is. It's just green screen, and so the sword, and you see it in the next shot as well. You get a better a better thing. And it was also stereoscopic movie as well, which I had done before, and I'm trying to remember what my first stereo movie was. But yeah, I mean, I had experience with stereo. I think Final Destination was maybe the first time I did stereo work. So there's a lot of challenges that come with doing stereoscopic movies, and I'm happy it's dying out because it's very difficult. But and this one, there's certain instances where they don't play into it as like a gag, but the ash that's falling down in this movie in 3D worked really well.
Yeah, I did. I taught my class. We dived into stereo and got into Ocula a little bit, and I was digging
Yeah.
it. But I did a whole lesson on visual effects work, and realizing that there's been gimmicks throughout history. One of gimmicks is anamorphic. Anamorphic is a gimmick. It's meant to squeeze a square image out to a widescreen. And that's to get people from watching TVs at home and going to theaters. And then you got 3D, which is this really weird grid warp reality of the image to get everything to line up horizontally as far as any vertical misalignments, so your eyes don't get headaches. So you're literally like grid warping every shot with those Ocula tools.
Yeah.
It's gimmick. Now they just 2D convert it, to some studio. But there was a window where people were doing this, and I don't know if I think Avatar is going to be true 3D, if I'm not mistaken. They're not doing the conversion process.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it would be weird if they did. I think it would be weird if they did the conversion just because they sort of pioneered or sort of launched the new stereoscopic revolution, so to speak. So, I mean, I would think James Cameron's really gunning for doing it in camera stereo rather than doing post.
Yeah, I think he's got too many sequels lined up, though, man. I don't know. I mean, I love Avatar. It was a great experience. I remember seeing that in theaters. It was so packed I had to sit at the front left of the. I'm looking up at the. I got like what's called the bowfinger seats, where I'm staring up at the screen in the corner. But it was an incredible experience, man. It was just absolutely amazing. And I don't think the story doesn't really hold for another 4 or 5 episodes. I think it's just, the cash register, cha-ching,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure it's going to be a blast, but good old Kiefer playing evil again here. So is this all, this stuff falling down, this is all you?
Yeah, so everything in every of these one of these shots, with the exception of things that are obviously CG elements, it's 100% me. Again, when you're working at the smaller studios, or not 200, 300 people sort of stuff, you have the opportunity to really hone in and do everything. There have been times where I've worked on shots and some of the roto has been sent out to India or a different company, or wherever it may be, and sometimes it works out, but sometimes you get the roto back and it's just not working. You got to do it anyway.
Yeah, I'm working on a gig right now where we outsource to India, and I found that just because you usually get 2 different types of roto. You get the kind of like the blurred version and then the hard edged one.
Yeah.
But even the hard edge or the blurred one never really matches up correctly. So you're like, I'm gonna have to do this by hand. I don't know.
And then you ask them for the file and they give it back to you, and it's just like a million points. It's impossible to edit, and you're just like, okay. And then you have to so you go in and you're like, well, this part of their roto is usable, so I'm going to use this part of their map, but then I'm going to redo the hand, or I'm going to redo this section and sort of put them together. I mean, that's my experience. So I guess.
Well, actually, Josh Parks, we interviewed Josh Parks, and he has a video where he goes into using the different type of color space transforms for keying on green screen, and I incorporated those into and that saved my rear end, because we had like all types of weird sand laying on set and on the green screen set, and all types of feathers. But those actual conversions made me get a better key than just the atypical green screen, red screen luminance key.
Yeah.
Any advice for anybody doing IBK Gizmo, IBK Color, Keylight when it comes to trying to match the edge scale?
Man, there's Nuke has a new tool that I'm trying to remember who developed it, but it's this sort of edge extend. They have it built into Nuke 12. But it's funny is I've had tools like that available ever since I remember being in Nuke. And there's sometimes I've developed, myself tools that kind of sort of extend this edge. But I think Nukepedia is the site that has like these sort of tools available, and they are so valuable to have edge extends. But you have to be careful because it's very obvious when it's not working. And when it comes with keying, I don't think there's ever been a time where one key has done the job for me. I've always had, multiple different types of keyers. Even, it was a prime mat and then IBK for a hard mat. I use the IBK, or maybe the IBK is working good to get all this hair detail. And I have 99% of the key is done, but I just need those extra few strands of hair, and the IBK is giving me that. But it's only in like this one section of the head that this key is working. So I would say that for people doing keying, start trying to get a hard mat first, and just start narrowing in on the details through multiple keys. And one is almost never going to work, and sometimes no key is going to work. And I've been in situations for a whole week. I try keying something, and then I keep trying just because I don't want to roto the whole thing. And then at a certain point, you give up, and you're like, well, I've tried everything. Just gotta get. If you just did it at the beginning, you would maybe been finished. But sometimes just keys don't work, and you just have to roto it all out. And I've rotoed and feathered the roto to get motion blur, and I've even painted in frame by frame, painted the alpha channel to get more motion blur, or get hairs by painting individual hairs. It's each shot is truly very unique. But hopefully, when you're on a sequence, the studios try to give you similar shots so that when you really get one working, you can maybe have a good running start for another shot in the sequence or the same angle.
So even in this
most
scene from Pompeii, you've got like what, two of the guy looking down, and then two of the guy on green screen being Kiefer Sutherland. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then blood effects and blah blah blah. So then we get to Jack the Giant Slayer.
It almost feels like the previous movie is this movie because they have that kind of medieval.
Yeah.
It feels like it's the same set.
This one, like, in fact, I think this particular shot too is the one I was saying earlier, where I had gotten assets, and I think on the bridge is where there's the giants from DD. But it was the fire, comping the fire in. There's this oil spill. Everything is CG on this shot, with the exception of the horse and the rider. They had a very small set, but it was greenery everywhere else. I remember this one was stereoscopic as well. I remember the 3D department. We were in one of our dailies, and I remember they showed one of their 100% CG where they introduced the castle. It was like a sort of drone-looking shot. It looked fantastic. There's people everywhere. And I remember looking at it, and I was like, this is really great. It looks really, really real. Like, it was good work. So, everything was CG on this one as well.
No, you were talking about breakdowns. At what level of permission do you have to go in and, or at least maybe it has to be off studio time to pull, do you do your own renders of the drop downs, or are you pretty much off limits to even go in there and tinker and create a custom render of drop downs of your breakdowns? You're only hoping that maybe the studio will have your shot be one of the breakdown reels that they put on their website to promote the actual studio itself. You don't get in there. You're not allowed to go in there and be like, okay, I'm going to make drop downs and they won't notice I'm doing this on the side,
No, never. It's when it comes to getting your shots, you just get what the end result is, unless they are doing a promo. So, there's been a lot of shots where I've done breakdowns or whoever, has asked me to do one, but they didn't actually end up using it, and I can't take it. Whether or not the production company didn't want that particular shot to be shown in the, raw footage of that shot, or what have you. So, yeah, I mean, the ones that I have breakdowns in my reel, that's because the studio has released that footage, and the ones that don't, it's just there's no public breakdown of it. So it's not, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's why, as I said, the side sheet of the breakdowns of what you did is so important when you're applying for jobs, because sometimes people look at it, they don't know what you did, or they know it's CG, but they don't know what you specifically did in that shot.
Would you say there's like a specific number, like 1.5, or if there's ever such thing as a half, where you're considered to be, quote unquote, in the industry? Like, is it like 1 to 2 features? Is that like, okay, the road will be less bumpy in getting work? Is that?
Yeah, I think once you're a few features or a few TV shows in, then I think you've solidified your place. One of the big things I personally believe is, you could be the best artist in the world, but if you're a nightmare to work with, you're never going to get a job. And we had this one guy at Soho, and I'm not going to name names.
Here we go.
But yeah, but I remember this guy came in, and everyone was super excited because he worked on the original Tron movie, and we were super excited to have him in, and it just didn't work out for him to stay for even the entire project. So it's, after a few features or a few projects, then people can see that not only can you do good work, but people like you enough to bring you back for more projects. And that's really the key, is be someone that is fun to work with. You don't want to be a downer, because you're going to work late, like it's bound to happen, but you have to stay positive. And you want to be someone that people want to have around working on projects with.
You can either be down or you could be daffy. Daffy is sort of like this, whatever,
exactly.
Giggles, you're like, what, like, daffy's the way to go if you're going to be in a situation like that. So anyway, so this shot right here, I think we got 2 shots to kind of flip through here.
Yeah, same sort of thing. This one's pure CG on this particular one, and then the next shot was a continuation where the drawbridge is opening up even more, and sort of inside the castle is real. So that sort of crowd back there is an element that is put in there.
Any preference as far as light wraps? Are you just using different types of light wraps? Do you do like one that's really tight and one that's really blurry, or is there?
Yeah, so that's typically what I do. I mean, there are tools in Nuke, these sort of light wrap tools, but I always end up making my own. I remember early on I developed this custom tool that I sort of distributed into the studio, and there's so many. Every studio has like their own stuff. But I had this tool that quickly gave me the edge of any alpha that I plugged into it. And then, so I used that a lot for not only doing edge extend stuff or working with edges of mats, but then also using it to generate light wraps and blurring, things like that. I haven't used Nuke's light wrap tool. I think it's come a long way, but yeah. It's typically
do most studios even use that light wrap tool, or is it just like here's our own?
Yeah, I think there's so many tools that they have inside of Nuke. It's hard to know if there's some studios working on it, but I think as I said, most of the time, people, especially when you're getting past roto and you've comped a few shots, you kind of know the workflow and you know what nodes do what. It's very quick to develop your own tools on what you want to do, and it gives you more control than having some tool that the light wraps this, but you wish it would just be a little bit more like this. And when you're building your own, using the math functions in the merge tools inside of Nuke, you can quickly grab a few merges, throw in a blur, and then do an XOR or a difference, and you have a sort of an edge alpha really quickly. And that's kind of what I did. And then, as you said, yeah, the light wrap Yeah, I was gonna say for in terms of light wrap, you do want that hard edge, especially around things like fire, and then you have varying blurs that sort of bring it out. And there's shots later on that'll get into more of the fire, and it gets more and more complex. There's certain shots. So you look at this one, it looks impressive. There's a lot of fires, a lot of CG, but then later in my reel, there's different shots that require more technical knowledge in terms of compositing and 3D in Nuke. But we'll get to that. A lot of these are renders from Giant Slayer. They're all renders from the 3D department. So it's, as I said, the hard work was on them to get the work looking good, and then I just sort of pieced it together. Yeah.
Is there any tools that I know you talked about your own custom tools created on your own, but is there any tools that you would recommend that are almost essentials or commonly used that are on Nukepedia that the studios you've worked with use a lot?
I'm gonna have to look up Wikipedia again because I think there's so many good Gizmo tools. I think they had a good edge extend one on there, if I'm not mistaken. But I would have to look.
There's
But
no edge extend inside of Nuke. That's why they obviously introduced it in Nuke 12 just
yeah,
recently. They're like, here it
yeah,
is. It's no longer, you don't no longer have to go and create it yourself.
yeah, exactly. So Nukepedia has so many good ones. I don't remember if you can look by downloads, but by the download count is usually pretty good. Some of their D-spill is pretty good. I'm just kind of looking through it right now, but there is a lot of stuff that you just kind of take a look at and see if it works. But on Nukepedia, the tricky part is some of those tools they're too much. When you're getting into compositing, especially for films and things like that, these D-spills, there's a very fine line that they're looking for with removing that green or the blue or whatever it is, just enough so you don't have it, because if you're going too far, then you're ruining the skin tones of the actors, and that's a big no-no when it comes to the production.
Yeah, I was working under, thankfully Sam Jackson has very dark complexion, so I was working on him for the commercials that I did, and I was thankfully shown some amazing key work by a couple of friends of mine who I was working with, and they had worked on Star Wars Episode 7, so I literally
Hmm.
was walked in the door. It was like, "What did you work
Yeah.
on?" "Oh, nothing." And he's like, "And
Yeah.
you just got off Star Wars 7." I'm like, "Uh
Yeah.
oh." But
It's
they
you
were,
know
they
it's
were,
it's always the way like that where before you're in the industry, you look up and you're like, there's these giants working on these great movies, and then you do it for a little bit and you meet some people, and then they go off and they work on Star Wars or Harry Potter or Avengers, and it's, but at the end of the day, it's just your friends or people that it's the same when you start going on set. You go on, and whether it's being like Mads Mikkelsen or as I said, for End of Sentence, there was the lead actor was nominated for Academy Award for Best Supporting Role, and you're talking to these people, and very quickly it goes from being this person that you thought was just like this, superstar, this god, and then now they're just a regular person.
my one of
Which
my students is the lead comper for Star Wars Episode 9 and the new Marvelian show, whatever that is, for the Star Wars show. And then I got a student to just email me that he's telling me that he likes the show. Shout out to guys at Walking Dead. I guess they're a big fan of the show
yeah,
too. So it's really weird
yeah,
seeing everybody kind of like stretch out and work for big time filmmakers and all this. And it's just like it's very odd. But you also, as a teacher, you reflect upon how were they as students when you knew them as students, and then you can later very easily figure out. Like I had one student just recently, and he came to me, and he had a fire for it, and I just looked at him and I said, "Dude, I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not the greatest compositor in the world, but
yeah,
one thing I am an expert at is spotting the patterns and the personalities that are going to not just make it, but make it, really make
yeah,
it." And I told him, I said, "You're going to do perfectly fine, dude." And now he's at Frame Store.
yeah. I mean, well, that's the other thing too is, I started going into sequence lead and things like that, and I'm fairly young, and there's people who are older than me, and they've been doing it longer than me, and now I have to go in and tell them kind of what I think, and it's a tricky thing because you have to sort of put egos aside, and I've had it happen to me where it's like people younger than me are way better, way more talented than I am, but it's not about egos. You learn quickly that it's this collaboration. You're all working for the same goal. It doesn't matter who's in charge or who's the sequence lead, but you come together as a team, and you're all gonna win in the end. Yeah. So this next one that we're looking at here is, I'm trying to remember which one it was.
So this is them on a motion control stage, I'm assuming, with the camera move, or
no, it wasn't motion control. It was, at least I don't think it was.
Was it like
It was just
locked down, and then you're just tracking them in as a still
Yeah.
plate? Okay.
Yeah. So we sort of moved that. Or I think they tilted the camera a little bit, but I think it was Revolution. I think that's what this one was. But yeah, they were just in some parking lot, and the thing that sucks about this breakdown is that there's errors in the breakdown that the camera pans away from the errors before the final shot is revealed, which is it's always annoying for me, and I can't go in and fix it. But I assure you, if you're spotting errors, that they are fixed in the final when you do the final wipe, because it's early. And
what sort of errors would we be looking for in this shot?
Specifically, every time I see it, it's the worst. It's the railing on the left there, right there in that sort of part. It's a doubled railing.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, double railing.
Yeah, it hasn't been removed. And that, it's one of those things. And I remember that, there's always shots that no one's ever going to notice. It's like the bottom left. There's so much action going on. People are looking into the, into the crowd and stuff like that as the shot's progressing. No one's looking at a railing. But for me, I know that's there. So
is the final grading? Is that the final grade treatment? Is that the colorist work where it goes to very, very orange here?
Yeah. So that's what they wanted, is sort of this, I don't know, sunset sort of thing. This one was a little bit tricky too, because the sailboat had all these little details. So it was two plates. One was the guys on the blue screen, and then there was another plate of this boat, but it was like a half-built boat, and they wanted to add more of these ropes and things like that. So that was a bit tricky. This one here with these guys walking along the dock is pretty straightforward. Blue screen. I just have it in there because I think it turned out pretty well. that's the only reason it's there. I was just like, yeah.
Now, when you deal with black pixels like this,
yeah,
is that where you're talking about, like, going in manually?
Yeah,
or
yeah. It's 100%. And same with tracking markers, right? Like, typically with tracking markers, though, what I like to do is before I key, I try and paint and do my key, because there's always going to be, no one's going to place tracking markers just to satisfy the visual effects artist, in their post-production. First and foremost, it's going to be sort of what the DOP and the camera is going to be, and then the actors and things like that. So if the actors go in front of it, then the actors go in front of it. Sorry. But so things like this, yeah, you have to roto that particular area. And then the same with tracking markers, as I said, you either roto around it.
We had an issue with Sam Jackson because he was going down a staircase, and the staircase, each different step, whether it was the facing towards the horizon or facing towards the sky, had a different shade of green. Yeah. And we had to make, because there's a different light wrap attribute when you pull the key. It moves more closer into the matte than the dark areas, and then we had to kind of differentiate both of those. I'm assuming you probably might have done something like that for this as well. But this is very dark. This is a dark blue screen.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a lot of roto on this. So each person had to be rotoed as well. And then there was various key. And on this one, I had help. So some of the junior people were offered as assistants to me in order to roto with people. We always thought it funny because like one of the actors in this too, that guy in the middle is kind of this George Bushy kind of look to him. Yeah, so that's what kept this particular shot a little bit more fun, I guess, as you're doing the work. But as I said, it's just a standard shot that showcases the basics.
So, Video Copilot?
So this one, I don't know if they have like a flare thing like this, but so this one was a mixture of, it's a sequence of burning through the hand for final destination and then the eye, and it was matte painting and tracking, and the laser was done in 3D.
Ugh.
So it was.
Gosh, this must have been fun to watch in theaters. Gosh.
There was a lot more to it too that they cut out. So it's as I said, it's part of the thing where you're doing more shots, and then you find out that your shots, they're not in the final edit, so you just don't get to use them. And I remember for Final Destination there was a whole sequence that they cut, which was rough because everyone, we worked hard on it, and then they were just like, it doesn't make sense. So they cut, I think it was like 20 or 30 visual effects shots.
Is there anything specific about this shot, like what you were doing? Were you just kind of revealing this as something?
Yeah, just reveal and then just integrating. I mean, as I said, technically it's not too difficult. The 3D asset sort of tracked into the hand and just revealing as it goes. This one here with the car, this is where you start getting into the harder stuff. Surprisingly enough, because it's all shot footage, and there's no CG on this particular shot. But the amount of takes that they did for this car, and this is from, I think it was from In Time. So they did quite a number of takes on this, and there was a lot of tire tracks on the road, and the whole thing was just removing 50 layers of tire tracks that they did take after take after take, and rebuilding the road.
So it's really just rebuilding the road because they're burning rubber here for many takes.
Yeah, and that was the whole shot is just something simple, whereas you have to, the entire road is rebuilt in comp, and sort of rebuilding all the shadows and the lines and making everything look like it is not rebuilt.
How just to throw it out there for those at home, how would you go about doing that in a generalistic way?
So on this one, I think this was before I really got into Nuke's 3D system, so it was patchwork and a lot of paint. And it was just tracking it in, and the good news for this one was that it was the ground's moving very quickly, so it's forgiving in terms of frame to frame matching, at least I think. But the first thing I did is try to isolate a good chunk of road. I asked one of the matte painting guys to try and paint me something that looked like asphalt or matched the road, and then I blurred it, made this giant road that covered everything, and then rotoed back in the car, rotoed in the shadows where I could, but some of the shadows couldn't be rotoed back in, so you had to just literally roto the shape of the shadow and darken it down. So there's just a lot of color correction, a lot of patches tracked in frame by frame on this one. And then after all,
not 3D, but 2D planar and 2D tracker type stuff.
Yeah, and then at the end of all that, you go through it and you just use the paint tool and just patch up where you can to make it work as best as you can.
Have you ever had those moments where you kind of hit a wall and you're like, I need help?
Yeah, it's it happens, and it's not even just early on that it happens very often where you get this sort of tunnel vision and you're working on something and you don't quite know how to do it and you're getting really frustrated and you just ask the people around you, hey, can you take a look and you have any ideas on where you can go with it? And it's, as I said, just early on, it doesn't happen. It happens throughout the entire career. You have everyone asking for advice. And it comes down to being collaboration and working as a team rather than individual. You know, egos aside, when you get into this business, you can be very proud of the work that you've done, but it's you know, you all made it through together in the end.
So is this a 3D
Yeah,
render? Is this a 3D render incorporated into a roto, like kind of like brought in right here?
yeah,
Now, how do you
yeah. So
keep
it's
it to move
they
with the?
had some
Go ahead. Sorry.
prosthetics. Yeah, so they had some prosthetics that were also part of it, but then it was 3D render and then using, as I said, grid warping to make it all go together. And that's why when I saw, as we were talking about earlier, Nuke 12 with grid warping, uh, that's going to solve a lot of problems. You know, I remember I did a test for talking animals, and the whole thing was CGing just the mouth, and then the cheeks of this dog had to move because the CG mouth was moving, and using grid warping was a big part of that. So
I did
yeah, I
that
mean,
for
if
a
you're getting
talking
into comp,
dog
if you're
once
just
too.
starting out, yeah, I mean, get into learn some grid warp stuff if you're getting into comp, because that's, especially when you're integrating stuff onto
Well,
skin, like that's a
the
big
old
part.
way of doing it was what? Doing a 2D track and then
Yeah,
just linking through expression that information into the actual grid, then drawing out the grid, and then getting in there and then.
that's 100%. That's 100% what we did for the talking dog is, you know, you have this grid and then you just attach trackers to different points of the grid and hope that it works good, but then it's always finicky and things didn't work as they should have. But yeah, so on that one with the rebarb and things like that, it was a mixture of the CG and then the prosthetics and then making it, you know, look like it all is coming out of this guy's stomach.
Well, now we go on to, it looks like
Yeah,
Sweeney Todd to a certain degree, which is not
yeah.
Sweeney Todd, but
So this one, I believe this one was for the TV show Copper. You know, as it's great that I have a breakdown for this one because it was a lot of work and there was a lot of.
now was this was part of the press
This one
release?
was
This wasn't
rendered
you just
3D.
saying, "Hey, would you mind handing me over the green screen original?"
No, it's part of the press that they did. So it was a mix of 3D background, but also using Nuke 3D and matte paintings. So the buildings, you know, we had rough shapes and sort of projecting into the background. This one was a bit tricky. I mean, I remember the sequence being fairly difficult because of all the intricate stuff with the green screen with this guy holding this horse whip or, you know, whatever it's called, and having to go through and again, rotoing things frame by frame or painting in little elements that need to be there. Um, but
You have this, whether you do the track or you have the tracking or the match move department gives you a track. You go into Nuke, you build rough geometry, you have choice frames that you give to the matte artist. He paints those according to those frames, and then you have, that's what you work with. Am I wrong about that? Or?
yeah, I mean that happens a lot of the times. But also, if it's more intricate stuff in the background, they might, you know, the 3D department will model something and then give you the model to bring into Nuke, so that it's even better. Stuff like buildings, you know, you might not have windows extending. You can get away with a flat object. Um, but yeah, as I said, stuff that's a little bit more detailed or closer up, they'll probably give you a more detailed
So
model.
that's that. This sort of like a extrusion here is actually painted in. It's not actually sticking out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry if I'm getting geeky on here. I'm always like trying to help the audience. Like they're always like, "Oh, how do you
Yeah,
do that?" Instead of like that's a cool reel. All right,
yeah,
moving on. You know, it's like, why not just? Because I'm trying to make this channel. I get a lot of people barking at me like, "Why don't you go into Houdini? Why don't you?" I'm like, "Cause I don't want that. I want to talk about compositing." You know what I
yeah.
mean?
You know, it's a tricky thing going through the workflow because, as I said, everything's different. So trying to say, you know, what worked on one shot is going to help out for other shots is not necessarily always the case. But hopefully, some of the stuff that people listen to, whether it be this video or, you know, I always look at videos too, and I'm reading stuff on how people did things as well, because you know, it just gives you ideas of what different ways that you can approach a shot. Maybe not what will work, but some ways that you can try.
I used to be a character technical artist at NetherRealm Studios, and I got to be the bridge between the animation and the modeling team. And it was just so huge for them to learn from me, for me to learn from them. So even if we're not talking about Houdini, the final product, you know, pulling all the elements together plays a huge part, in my opinion. I was shocked to see when I was working on the Sam Jax commercials how many nuke screens were open for the modelers. They were all doing they were basically building what they would eventually show as their daily work update to Rob Churchill, you know, our art director. That's what he would send every day, and it's just like, wow, everybody knows nuke. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's a funny thing too. Even when I was at Soho, it came a time where we wanted to streamline the process for lighting department to get the renders to the comp artists. And so instead of just saying, oh, the passes are done, here they are, they would in turn sort of pre-comp some sort of slap comp of their lighting setup, kind of how they wanted it to be. And maybe they'll throw in a grade node and they'll do a little bit of color correction to make it work. And then they'll pass that on to the comp guys.
Well, considering your background that I'm seeing on my Skype feed has went from daylight to night. If we don't know, we're going to see that sunrise.
Let's turn on my. Let's turn that on.
There we go. There we go. We're getting. I don't want to rush through this, but I know we're probably going to have to.
Iceland's fine. You know, it's we're sort of that midway. In the summer, it's always daylight. This one goes into darkest hour. It's this one. I was still at Soho, and there was a lot of discussion and look development on this one at the studio with how that creature was going to look and how the force field. So, if those that have not seen the movie, and you know, it's not a widely popular movie, but it's almost like an invisible alien that sends out these tendrils that are almost. They're not electrified, but it gives that kind of look. But the invisible field around them has some sort of distortion around it. So the background is supposed to be distorting, you know, along the whole thing. So there's a lot of development on that. And the color changed a lot, the actual look changed a lot, but then the director went with this end look. Again, you know, it's with these ones here, it's a bit easier than some of the other basic shots because a lot of it's done in 3D. So it's more just taking the 3D elements, you know, this bright light, making sure that it's bright on the CG character, making sure that it's bright when it, you know, color correcting and things like that. But it's not as difficult as people see. I mean, the difficult part, I should say, is more towards the 3D department and the FX guys. I mean, they work really hard on doing that stuff.
Is there any specific AOVs that you always prefer or ask for or assume to have when you're working with shots like this?
Yeah, I mean, well, you'll never just get like a beauty pass. Like I don't think I've ever used, you know, just a beauty. But the one thing that I've recently I always want now cameras, no matter what, even if the shot's kind of not. I mean, if it's locked off, that's one thing. But if there's any kind of movement, I always want the 3D camera in an FBX or something like that to bring into Nuke because I like that control. If I need to put something, if the FX is all good, but they want just a little bit of smoke or something, I want to be able to put a card there really easily. So I always ask for that. But I always want like a depth, like a point position pass, and it escapes me exactly what it's called now, coming out of the 3D renderers, but it's not quite deep. It's sort of the old way of getting deep, where you can get the position in sort of like a point cloud of where everything is inside of Nuke, and I use that again a lot.
Create like box-based 3D masking, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Or you know, if I have the camera and then I have the position of the 3D elements, then it's everything I need to add stuff in that I need. So I know those two things are always a must for every shot.
Is it you still use PG Bokeh big time when you come to, or is that like
on the PG Bokeh? on these shots, it was pretty big. Because that's a plugin, right? I remember that we purchased. I think, yeah, that's like a plugin that we bought for some of these shots, because we did, and I think they have a deep plugin as well. Yeah, so PJ Bokeh is a plugin. I don't think it's cheap for people who are independent. You know, for what it is, it's and all these things are expensive. But on these shots, so this is with this creature is for Hannibal, and these shots are from the episode that sort of led me to the Emmys. But these ones, it's actually a puppet that they had 4 or 5 guys controlling and walking this puppet along. So it wasn't on green screen or anything. They were, the room is what it is, and then the guys are there. So the whole comp on the sequence was the antlers are CG. So it was replacing the antlers that they had there, because the antlers are growing throughout the sequence, removing all the puppeteers, recreating the background, but then also on top of all of that, all of this muscle that is sort of on this puppet needed to move and flex as it's walking. And that was a lot of grid warping on these shots as well.
So your grid. So in other words, you're probably, I'm assuming, 2D or planar tracking, getting that grid in there, and then just
Yeah.
kind of like mimicking musculature movements from real animals similar to that, and you're just sort of like letting the folds occur.
Yeah, exactly. And trying the best that you can to make it look like these muscles are moving. And so, the puppet was fantastic. The guys did a great job doing it, but then also another issue that we ran into when we're doing the comp work is the puppet were too linear with their movement of weight as it's walking. So we had to also, make it sort of go up and down as it's walking around and look like it's shifting weight from side to side as best that we can. So yeah, I mean that was that shot.
These are some dark shots, man. Whew.
Yeah, they graded these pretty dark.
Bet you had the gain
and
up,
it's sort of
the viewer gamma and viewer. What's going on back there?
Yeah, and these are again, it's part of Hannibal, and that's when the character, the Red Dragon character, he envisions himself as this dragon. For those of you out there that have not, don't know the story about Hannibal or Red Dragon, there's some movies as well based on it. But yeah, so it's these CG wings that are put on. Some of the shots in there are very stylized because it's sort of his, inside of his thought, inside of his mind of how he looks. Yeah, and then the other ones where he's fighting both Hannibal and Will Graham, the two other characters in the show. That's again, he doesn't actually have these wings. It's kind of like how he perceives himself as being this super strong person. And then comping the wings, again, it was a CG element that was given. And then rotoing him completely out. These are not blue screen shots, which is what they would have done for these nighttime ones probably. So it's, yeah, rotoing the characters out and adding and just doing it. Yeah, which shot next? I think my reel's too long. I think is what it is.
Hey, the more the merrier here, at least in our circumstance.
There's a lot to do regarding how are we going to make this work, because they have just this 1 or 2 tents, and they've shot a ton of plates of just actors walking around. How do we make it like this big campsite? The background with, I think it's the White House is in the background. That's a matte painting with some stuff. But then the tents, they had a few 3D tents, and they just did a few matte paintings, but then all of that geo came into Nuke, projected that all on, taking all of these different actors against green screen, keying, I don't even know how many people are keyed in this thing, putting them on cards, putting all of them into where they're supposed to be in 3D, but then the true thing that I'm really proud of is all of the lights in and amongst the campsite. So that's all Nuke lighting and interacting with the geo that's inside of Nuke, and then working with expressions to flicker that light to make it look like, campfire or some sort of lantern. It was a heavy scene, but I think it turned out really, really well.
So this is this right here is not on set. These are just 3D, like
that's the set piece.
that's the set, and then all of these are projection based, simplistic geometry inside of Nuke, and then you're going in and adding rotos, and then bringing in expressions with flicker nodes to flicker out the lights.
Yeah. It's the funny thing is all the shots that I think are really good are the ones that they look kind of simple. As I for the audience member, it looks fantastic, and I think a lot of that it goes to the lighting department and the 3D guys and the comp guys. We do work as well for it, but it's shots like this where it's subtle, and you just wouldn't really think it's an in-your-face visual effects shot. These are the ones I'm always like, it worked really well. People look at it, it looks like a crowded campsite. There's where no one thinks twice about what it is. Those are the shots I think I'm most proud of.
So you have obviously buildings here that had no flicker at the time. So you're animating flicker on the CG houses, and you need to bring that flicker over here to reflect onto.
Yeah. So there's yeah. I mean, as I said, it's a lot of stuff and a lot of different assets, and and then going to the final shot, which was for this movie, Rupture, I believe. So this one, I think it's called, it was Rupture. So the only real element was her at the very start. It's just on set against green screen with this sort of cage in front of her. But, the whole box around her is fake, and then everything else is CG. This one was majority rendered, but it was also the first time that we started experimenting with deep compositing on this one. Yeah, so so that was the first time that we were like, let's try it and see what we can do, because it does give a little bit more control. Although, as we're experimenting with how we can use deep, we realized, me and my buddy Kevin, who was doing the CG on it, we realized that the file size of these deep files are just like astronomical. It's like you have to really want to.
Now, when you refer to using deep, there's two categories we've been hearing over this period of time here. There's I use deep to create a mask, and then I use actual deep to merge together with the deep merge nodes. Which one of those were you using?
This was using deep merge. So there was a lot, because it's an entirely CG, and it's kind of spoiling. It's towards the end of the movie as well. The director had very particular opinions about each element everywhere. So a lot of things changed in this shot, and they wanted the changes to happen and see those changes very quickly. So with deep, it was really easy to just sort of pop things in and out without having to do these giant renders, and new holdout mats and things like that. So that's why we started thinking, how can we use it? And we're like, let's just go all in and just render everything deep, and just position things.
You really can't get away with shifting things in front of behind unless the parallax is non-existent. Hence, they are the things that are furthest away from camera. Am I wrong about that? Or
Yeah, well, the things that we were looking at was behind all of these sort of like vent pipes, I guess. There's a lot of different elements, and there was these lights that were on the roof, that were sort of illuminating the roof of where she is, and those things were objects that we were experimenting with deep. Again, when you look at some stuff that Wet is putting out and the stuff that they're doing with their deep, it's quite remarkable. And then, stuff like this is just kind of us playing around and saying, how can we use this for us? What makes sense for this studio that's not, 500 people, or we don't have, a ton of CG. But it was a good way that we were sort of looking at rendering out deep, working on the workflow of how we can render deep out, and then taking it into Nuke and saying, what can we do with it, and how can we incorporate stuff, whether it be, as you say, holdout mats, or taking the deep end result and doing deep merges and things like that.
Cool. Well, it's an awesome reel, sir. And definitely, I think people definitely got an education out of what we discussed. I love breaking down these reels, man, and just kind of like interrogating the guest.
Yeah.
Just trying to.
It's how, it's like it's a memory lane for me.
That's what everyone says. They're always just like, oh boy, here we go. They're like, what movie was this? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. We got a couple questions here, and then we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
So just a few. We only had a couple days to throw this out here. In general, what do you? And I'm saying, like, any improvements as somebody that's watched the show. Is there anything on here you're like, what? It'd be cool if. Any recommendations?
For my own stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's, in terms of my own work, when I look at it, you're always going to be your own harshest critic. And every single one of my shots, I know where there are things that could have been done a lot better. I'll never tell people because I don't want everyone to sort of know where to look, because it pulls you out. But there's always stuff in each shot, and there's certain times where even you're not done with something and you just run out of time, and the shot just is kind of good enough. And that's a hard experience a hard thing to go through, is sort of at that point. But for me, as I said, looking through it, the stuff I would do differently, looking back at the techniques, I wish I dived into Nuke 3D a bit sooner than I did, because I think it would have helped out with a lot of stuff. The stuff they're doing with like vector maps and ST maps and things like that, and all this vector stuff inside of Nuke, I think that's a big thing these days. A lot of my friends are getting into sort of that stuff. So, and then Nuke particles is going to be big. So I think I don't have a lot of experience with Nuke particles, but that's something that I've recently started looking into on using, because it's the stuff you can do is really, really amazing. And from the Marvel movies, I think they used Nuke particles for one of the James Bond intros. So that's an avenue that I'm looking into for myself.
Reality I see of what they updated was obviously to really press a lot of the complaining about the way that the 3D scan line, all that was just chugging away slowly, and now they're like, all right, now you're going to be able to take full potential of the particle systems and all this other stuff, and not wait 20 years to do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's the only thing I ever did with the particles was for the movie Before I Wake. There's a scene, with the rebar in his stomach. He eventually pulls it out, and there's a blood trail that comes out with it. And so I did Nuke particles for all the blood dripping off. And I tried some Nuke particles for a shot in Hannibal as well, where, I guess it's a spoiler, where there's some blood stuff. But there was someone getting a circular saw or something onto their temple, and there was blood and bone particles coming. So I used Nuke particles for that, because I thought it would just be quicker. There's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and there wasn't anyone free at the time. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try, and it worked out pretty well. So, the more that you can do as a compositor, I think the better it's going to be, especially during crunch time. So, yeah.
Well, we got Dosh. What is this? Dosh Doctor. Here's a question that I'm sure will be an interesting answer, because I don't think there is an answer. How do Iceland studios compare to other VFX studios?
They're smaller. They're much smaller. But it's a collaborative thing. In terms of a small studio, And in Iceland versus a small studio in, say, Toronto or wherever, it's the same. You know, it's all the people that I've met anywhere have kind of had the same sort of personality and the same sort of work methodology, more or less. So it's the same. Overall, the industry here is smaller than you're going to find in, say, Toronto or London or LA, you know, all these big visual effects hubs. There's going to be less of it here in Iceland. But, you know, when you're comparing small studio to small studio, it's the same.
And then Vortex Show, who loves asking questions. I'm going to have this guy on the show. Do you want to work for big shops one day, or do you prefer mid-sized studios? What are the three most... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, for that, I think, you know, I prefer the mid-sized ones. And I think I touched on it a bit earlier, where when you're at a big studio, you don't have the freedom. You're sort of pigeonholed into this one task. So if you were to say you're starting your career and you're starting at DD, or maybe you have a little bit of experience outside of the roto department, but you might just be doing roto for quite some time. You know, whereas the small to mid-sized studio, you get the opportunity to try out, you know, these big shots like I had the opportunity for Night and Day. You know, they were like, hey, you know, go for it. Let's see what you can do. And you might not be presented with those opportunities at the bigger places.
What are the three most important things you learned over the years?
I would say number one is don't be negative. You know, you're all there together. You're all working overtime. It doesn't help to complain. The second one is you have to be able to learn on your own. But then I guess the sort of goes into the third one is don't be afraid to ask other people for help. But, you know, being a teacher, one of the things, or for like the small amount of time that I did that, I realized that there has been a big shift, and, you know, you might agree with this as well, whereas when I was in school, you know, I would go out and I would have to learn and sort of do research on my own. And then when I hit a wall, you'd come and you'd ask, you know, your teacher, professor, or whoever it is. Whereas now, the students I had, as soon as they didn't know, they just were so quick to just ask, rather than try and figure something out for themselves. So I think, you know, in terms of number two and number three is you need to be able to try and discover and research and figure things out on your own. But then number three is you can't be so proud that you can ask the people around you, whether they've been there for 20 years or, you know, 2 months. You can just turn and say, hey, you know what, I'm kind of stuck here. You know,
I would add to number four is keep an eye on how busy the people that you want to ask those questions are. Because I've had that situation myself where I'm like, hey, can you come over? And they're like, I'm a little busy, you know. I find that to be a big one. I just think today, the students today, I don't know, again, when you get to teach for like 13, 14 years, you see, at least in the States, culturally, whatever, the way you're raised, or even like the problem solving skills, the what I call pioneer spirit, going out there, figuring it out yourself and getting what you can. The ones that really have that reality, that pioneer spirit, are few and far between, more and more and more every year. And it's always what I call basket case mode, where they kind of like throw their hands up, oh, help me, you know. And it's just like, I can help you, I can keep helping you, but there's too much reliance on your teacher. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, you have to be able to do it on your own. You know, you're going to leave school or you're going to go to a different job, and those people that have been sort of helping you, that you've been turning to this whole time, they're not going to necessarily be there. And so you need to sort of have that fundamental, and not to discredit going to school for visual effects, but I think a big part of going to school for things like visual effects, or even in general, is more, you know, you're there to learn on how to learn yourself. You know, with the internet, there's all this information that you're learning in school on compositing, or all the stuff I'm saying. You know, it's all out there. People just post tutorials and stuff like that all over the place. I mean, Video Copilot, I remember when I was in school, I was checking that out all the time. So why are people going to school if that's there? And the reason is because it's a good structure, and people who are teaching you how to learn and how to sort of bring that knowledge, on your own, sort of go out and get it. And that's my opinion, at least, for on how what
I was
school is
getting my
all
hair
about.
done at a barber shop, and my barber, God bless her, was the one that got me my first gig working at a game studio, another role. She had known the head of the Cinemax department. So here I am getting my hair done, and
It's like,
this mother comes in with her son, and she sits her down. And she's like, and he was talking about how he's going into game design and all this, and of course I'm sitting there, with working at a AAA studio in my past. And I said, he's like, well, Matt will tell you about that. And I said,
yeah,
I said, have you played any? Have you worked in any? Have you worked in Maya at all? He's like, no. Have you done any Unreal work at all? Have you played around at all? And even Blender? No. No, no, but I want to be a game designer. And I'm just like, no,
yeah, yeah.
quick way to solve all these problems for all of these schools is if the game student doesn't come in there with an off the cuff when you ask him, what have you worked on? If they don't mention Unreal or Unity, then no thanks, shouldn't be in here. And if you have people that come in
Yeah.
and want to do 3D work, if they haven't touched Maya or 3D Studio Max or Blender or whatever, I would say no.
Yeah,
you know.
it's there's no excuse at this point. All of these pieces of software are free to learn on, and there's no charge. It's not like back in the day where you wanted to learn Buju or like one of these, massive. I think is what the crowd simulation stuff was called. You couldn't get a copy to use yourself, so then you're trying to like find this illegal copy and going down that road. But nowadays, there's all these versions available for you to teach yourself on and to learn with. So there's really no excuse to not, if you really want to do this, to not go in and just dive in deep, head first on your own, and then use the school to sort of supplement your own learning.
Well, it's been a blast, Rob.
Yeah,
Thank you for being on. If you guys would like to learn more about Rob, check out robtasker.com. I have his IMDB linked at the bottom, or should. Again, thank you for your wealth of knowledge. Thanks for reaching out to me. I'm looking forward to. I think the channel's will be growing, and again, we usually have a 1 year anniversary, so we'll come back and visit you a year from now and see how you're doing.
sounds good.
But thanks so much. Do you have anything you want to leave the audience with? I always give people the last words.
Yeah, so last thing, and I think it's the most important, is you're always going to get stressed out at some point in this career. So find something that you absolutely love doing that helps with that. For me, I love playing music. I'm not a professional in any way, but I remember even if I was at the studio or on set for 16, 17 hours a day, I would always go home, maybe play some guitar or a little bit of drums, and just sort of unwind and relax, and then that way, hopefully it doesn't build up. So find that one thing that sort of that you're really happy doing, and sort of hold on to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, sir, for coming on.